Is Gran Turismo 7 a dead game? So many people are saying online that Gran Turismo 7 is in a terrible state. People are stopping playing it. The updates are terrible. No new cars, no new real world tracks. There's dirty driving. But is this true or not? In this video, I'm going to let you know using hard evidence what the state of Gran Turismo 7 is like. We're going to look at actual sales data. We're going to look at actual hardcore player numbers that you can't really find anywhere else. And we're going to look at Gran Turismo 7 online versus single player. So it's understandable if you're worried about the future of Gran Turismo 7, whether it's a sim where you should be spending your time or whether it's basically just being ready to shut down. But by the end of this video, you are going to know the absolute exact state of Gran Turismo 7 right now. So like I said, we're going to be looking at the hardcore data, and as someone that's in the Gran Turismo 7 movie, I know I never mention it, and whose YouTube channel is basically built on Gran Turismo, the consequences of this video are really going to dictate how much time I'm going to be spending in Gran Turismo 7 as well. So let's get into it, and I want to start with sales. Now, you won't hear a lot of people talking about sales data because Sony and PlayStation don't make it particularly easy to find. But it's very important to know just how well Gran Turismo 7 has been selling, particularly in comparison to previous Gran Turismos. Now, using sales data we've been able to get from some analysts, it has been confirmed that Gran Turismo as a whole is Sony's best-selling franchise on PlayStation. And would you believe this? When you rank all of the Gran Turismo games in the best-selling franchise, do you know which is the second best-selling game? Well, as of February 2024, and this is according to Matt Piscatella, he's executive director of a sales analytic company. He's got the data. Gran Turismo 7 is second. It's the second best performing game in the GT franchise in dollar sales in the US, by the way. And that's only behind, if you can guess this, and that's amazing, Gran Turismo 3 A-Spec. Can you believe that? Not GT4, not GT6, it's A-Spec. And given GT7 is probably even more popular than A-Spec in Europe and Japan, it seems likely that GT7 will actually be the most financially successful game in the franchise, way more successful than GT Sport. So if you're worried about Gran Turismo 7, that bit of hard data should encourage you because it incentivizes Sony to invest more money in the game, to keep going with the updates and keep going with the quality updates. And let's go straight on to updates because it's so controversial. I've covered every single Gran Turismo 7 update on this channel, and I know it's a really sensitive topic. I read all of your comments to all of my videos, and I know so many of you are frustrated about the lack of up-to-date cars, particularly race cars and new racing tracks. Now, I want to play devil's advocate here. I think one thing, and this is not a sponsored video, by the way, like Sony, PlayStation, I don't even know I'm making this, it's completely honest, but we do have to recognize that these updates in Gran Turismo 7 are free, and they still are very well detailed. Like the cars that come in, no one's saying they're not well detailed. The tracks that come in, no one's saying they're not well detailed. So the fact they're coming in as free patches and not paid DLC, I think does show a real commitment from Sony and Polyphony Digital to maintaining the quality of Gran Turismo 7. And they've also done, well, they did a particular major update. That was November last year. You might remember I covered it. We got the Spec 2 update. I think this is so important. Such an important mark for Gran Turismo 7 if we see a Spec 3 update, because Spec 2 increased the game's UI, increased the usability of it. And Kaz Yamauchi himself said after Spec 2, the active users in Gran Turismo 7 doubled. Like the changes to the weekly challenges we had, we sort of had better time trials as well. All that stuff that came in Spec 2 was a really increased the player base, and that's why I hope in Spec 3 they're going to go further in that. But not everything is positive. We know that the sport mode races are not particularly inventive from Polyphony Digital, even though they are updated on a weekly basis. And we also know that Polyphony Digital have basically abandoned the updates for PSVR 2. By that I mean they're not bringing PSVR 2 updates all the time. They're not, for example, increasing the usability of the HUD. And I've been probably the most vocal YouTuber on this. I've said they need to make the HUD more raceable. They need to add more detail. There needs to be one button that turns the HUD on and off. Because at the moment, if I'm really honest with you, which I just am, I'm going to tell it, PSVR 2 can't be used in a competitive scenario on Gran Turismo 7. Now, I don't know exactly why this is, because GT7 is such an important game for the PSVR 2. It's actually genuinely a killer app. But what I can say is for people that have bought a PSVR 2 like myself, it's not gifted, I bought it, and enjoy racing in VR, it's very, 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 very frustrating. And, you know, are PSVR 2 players going to stay with Gran Turismo 7, or are they going to go onto a big PC sim rig and use something like a Pimax Crystal? Now let's take a look at some hardcore data here when it comes to the state of Gran Turismo 7. We're going to use the time trials in GT7's sport mode, and this is incredible to see because we have the actual numbers you're going to see coming up of how people are interacting and playing the game on a weekly basis. So we've gone to the leaderboards and we've seen how many people are participating in the time trials. They're available online if you can go and get the data, and what I've done is plotted the graph here, and this graph shows the evolution of the number of participants over the past year or so, so from April 2023 all the way up to last week's time trial. And for me, very surprisingly, so this is a really interesting video to do, this graph shows that over 2 years after the game's release, the player base is still trending upwards, and the highest number of participants occurred in April of this year during the Daytona Triover time trial, where we saw a peak of almost 250,000 participants. So we saw almost 250,000 players participating in Gran Turismo 7 that week. That shows that the GT7 user base is not only very healthy and stable, but it's actually growing. Now let's keep going with the data. I hope you really enjoy this, because we're going to look at achievements, because achievements also give us some hard data on how many people are playing the game, and it's not quite as positive actually. Well, when you look at it at first glance, only 35% of players have actually finished the game, and 16.4% of players have completed a single sport mode race. That is pretty incredible. So about 84% of players have not completed a single sport mode race. Now, on the face of it, you'd think that the percentage of people participating in sport mode would be higher, especially when you think of how many PS Plus subscribers there are, about 50 million, and GT7 is such a popular game. But you've got to remember that Gran Turismo 7 does hide sport mode behind quite a few cafe menu books, and I wonder if it's hurting them. In fact, part of the reason I think that is we looked at some more data and we saw that 26% of players in GT7 have achieved the trophy going the distance to get the Atlantic, which is basically you have to drive 5,000 kilometers online. So you can do that in a lobby. So it seems that a small number of people, relatively, have committed to finishing the game. A really small number of people are actually doing sport mode, but there's a decent chunk of people who are doing online lobbies. So it seems like the community aspect of Gran Turismo 7 is arguably more popular than the sport mode aspect. Now, the last metric we're going to look at in this video is the popularity of Gran Turismo online, generally online. So we've looked at YouTube searches and we've looked at other analytics as well. This should give us a really good idea of how active the community is when it comes to watching content made around the game, including my content. And this graph shows a Google Trends for the amount of searches for Gran Turismo 7 on YouTube from 2022 until now. Now, there's obviously a large spike at the time of the release of the game, after which the amount of searches diminished rapidly to around an eighth of the peak, which is more or less where it stayed since then, and that would indicate a stable level of popularity online. Really cool to see this data. So let's just take stock. Over the course of this video, we've seen some of the most important metrics we can get regarding GT7's success or failure. That's sales performance, updates, player numbers, and engagement, as well as its popularity online. And I say overall what we've seen here does generally paint a picture of, objectively, a very successful title. Now, there are some confusing bits of data like the low completion rate and also disappointments, like we know the lack of continued support for PSVR 2, but it's so impressive financially and it's so impressive with the user base. I do think GT7 will continue to be supported. And I think because of that, it's really important that channels like myself, we continue to give that honest feedback to Gran Turismo 7 on what they can improve. And it's also really important that you like and subscribe to this channel and share this video if you agree that GT7 is a great game, but we want to shape the direction it's going in. So if you want to see more up-to-date race cars, if you want to see more UI improvements, if you want to see better combos in sport mode, if you want to see tuning menus being able to be shared easily, if you want to see livery makers get rewarded in credits and all these things, then those are the things I'm advocating for. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe. There's going to be more GT7 videos around here, and I'll see you next time.